Parliament overwhelmingly passed, just 12 rebels, new legislation to say that this lockdown can continue until the end of March. I'm not going to argue here today about lockdown and whether it works, although I have to say in the county of Kent, the last lockdown didn't seem to do much good. What I want to think about is something really important that I don't think is being discussed enough, and that is what is happening in the name of fighting COVID to our freedoms, our liberties. Is there a danger we could become something akin to a police state? All right, I know that sounds a bit out there, but we are back to the worst excesses of lockdown rules last March. Indeed, people are now told they can go out to exercise locally, but they can't stop, they can't dawdle whilst they're out. They can't sit down on a park bench. And Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, was asked about this yesterday. You know, are the police going to stop people outside and ask what they're doing? And she said, police have been asking people why they are out and about when the message right now is stay at home. So if you're watching this and you're in your 80s and you've got arthritis, and you're taking a dog out for a walk in the local park, don't sit down on the park bench. Otherwise, the bobby may come and ask you why you're there. How does this do anything to prevent the spread of coronavirus? And I thought we were being told by medical experts that one of the biggest problems with COVID-19 is vitamin D deficiency. So far from trying to lock people inside their houses under house arrest, I would have thought, particularly on the odd day we get when it's sunny, that people should be allowed to go out and about. So I find that disturbing, maybe not terribly serious, but I don't like the idea that the police can stop you and ask, you know, why are you there? But it goes much further, because we're seeing again this phenomenon of neighbour turning against neighbour. Now, I spoke a few minutes ago to Ian Dale, broadcaster, well known to many of you. Ian lives in rural Kent, just outside Tunbridge Wells. And the other day, during the middle of the day, he was playing loudly at home something called trance music. Now, I'd never heard of it either, and I wouldn't recommend it particularly, but he was playing trance music, and clearly someone reported that he was playing music. The police knock on the door and ask whether there's a party going on. This wasn't 3 o'clock in the morning with cars parked all down the road. It was a little rural location, and it struck me, you know, what on earth are the police doing following up complaints from neighbours or passers-by like this? But very much more seriously, have a look at this very disturbing video from Scotland.
My house. That is William, right?
It's not William.
Yes, it is.
It's not
It's my house. Get out of my house. I did not ask you in here. Get out.
We could have forced the door if you didn't open it.
For what offence? For what offence?
Because of suspicion that you have people within your address that do not belong here.
I am a woman of this land, right?
Women of this land are not, doesn't matter.
Wrong man. No, but it's wrong man. Get out of my house. Get
Absolutely not. You
right
should
now.
again, I'm going to lift you for a breach of the peace.
Oh, just stop it, man. In my house.
Yes.
In my house.
Yes.
I do not think so.
Oh, trust me.
What's wrong? What the fuck is wrong with you, mate?
Right, no.
Mum,
Hey.
no, please, my mum, no, please stop it, my leg, you know what? Please stop it! My leg. She's got anxiety. She's just been at hospital. She's just been at hospital. What is going on? She's just been in hospital. Get off of her! She's got epilepsy. She's got epilepsy. Right now!
So what this shows is the police going to that woman's front door, threatening to smash the door down if she doesn't let them in, because they've received a tip-off that somebody has gone into her apartment. Well, it turns out the person that had gone into the apartment was her seriously ill daughter who'd just been discharged from hospital. I mean, behaviour like this does not get citizens on side supporting the police. It is going way, way too far. What about the workplace? Well, incredibly, the BBC have announced at Broadcasting House in London, top of Regent Street, that they're actually going to put electronic devices on the person of their employees when they go into the building. And if they come within 2 meters or 6 feet, whichever you prefer, of each other, there'll be a loud bleeping sound. I mean, I can understand why they want social distancing in the office, but it does begin to feel a bit like an Orwellian nightmare. And if the BBC have done this, or are about to do this to their staff, well, what's to stop other large corporate companies from doing so? You see, all this legislation, and it began in Blair's time, legislation that was brought in to prevent terrorism tends to get used in ways that have nothing to do with terrorism. We've seen very much rule by diktat over the course of the last few months, and I just feel this is all going way too far. But I'll finish with what I think is by far the worst and the most sinister thing that I've seen this week. I've said previously that I was really worried that the direction of travel was taking us to a place that East Germany was before the Berlin Wall came down. And I talked about the fact that in East Germany, the Stasi, the secret police, encouraged children to report on their parents if they were pursuing activities or having conversations that were not in line with the communist regime. So I've said several times since the COVID broke out nearly a year ago, I don't want to live in East Germany. Well, almost unbelievably, going through the House of Lords right at this moment in time is the Covert Intelligence Bill. And one of the clauses of this is it will actually enable the authorities to have child spies. You think I'm making this up? I really wish I was. No, 16 and 17-year-olds can be used, if this bill goes through, to inform MI5, MI6, the Gambling Commission, the National Crime Agency, even your local county and district council. They will be child spies that can report on their parents' activities. Now, you might say, well, what if their parents are about to commit a terrorist act? Well, they could report that anyway, I guess. But I mean, the fact this goes down to district council level, I mean, does it mean that, you know, a 17-year-old with a hump can report their parents for not doing the recycling correctly? I don't know. The fact we're even discussing having child spies in this country, I think, is beyond belief. I think it's truly awful. I'm very pleased that Anne Longfield, the Children's Commissioner, has spoken out strongly against this. I'm amazed there is not more in our press about this. I don't want to live in East Germany, and I'm sure that you don't want to either. And none of this does anything to prevent the spread of COVID. And that really is the point about all of these examples I've given you. In none of these cases was there any risk of COVID spread. And yet the police, the authorities, and very much backed up, it seems, by the Home Secretary and many others, are able to infringe upon our personal space in a way that in previous times would have been unthinkable. You know, I fought a very long campaign for us to leave the European Union. And one of the reasons I did that is I wanted us to be free. But what kind of freedom is this going to be if during this and every other crisis, the state takes more and more power? So I want people to be aware of what is being done in the name of fighting COVID-19, but in almost every case has very little to do with it. It is turning neighbour against neighbour. It is turning people against the police force, and it is not going to stop the spread of this virus. And I do wonder, once the state takes power, how on earth do we get those powers back? Do we have enough independently minded MPs in Westminster to challenge the executive once we're through this crisis to say those powers need to be returned? Those liberties and freedoms need to go back to the people. In fact, I'm beginning to think that the battle for our individual liberty could be an even bigger battle than the battle to get us out of the European Union.